Welcome to another episode of Day One Radio. As you see, or as you hear, my dude Maurice is not here with me today, so I'm gonna rock it solo. We've been doing this thing for a little over 5 years, and this brother that we got on today is somebody that me and Maurice had discussed having on a while. We always like to chop it up with intellectuals that are not so intelligent that they can't chop it up with the average man.
I don't know if that's a compliment or what.
No, that's definitely a compliment. That's definitely a compliment. So he's professor at Morehouse, journalist, been published, written books. You know, one of the preeminent minds in psychology, especially when discussing black boys and black men, black people in general, and pop culture, man. Welcome, David Wall Rice, man. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, man. It's a pleasure to finally get here.
No doubt. Thank you for coming through. I appreciate it wholeheartedly, man. So what's dope to me, especially as a writer, like I love to see how people transition and still writing or still, you know, I think once you're a journalist, you're always a journalist to an extent. Yeah. But transitioning into doing other things, did you always know that you wanted to teach?
No, I didn't. I think, I don't know. It was a circuitous route, obviously. Mm-hmm. When I'm a kid, you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or something like that, right? And my mom's a clinician. She's a clinical psychologist, and my dad's an academic. He was a statistician. Mm-hmm. So I knew that I wanted to do something. I just thought, lawyer, doctor type stuff. Yeah. But I always loved to write. Nice. So no matter what, when I was a little guy, I know that I used to just write stories, and I had a cool imagination and things like that. And then in high school, I was on the school paper. When I was in college at Morehouse College, I was editor of. First, I was co-editor of the arts entertainment section for the school paper, Moon Tiger, right. And then I became editor in chief. And I really, I love to write, but I always would tell people I wanted to be, have these positions so I could get free CDs.
Yeah, I understand that.
Go to be in the know.
Go to the concert.
Exactly. Yeah. But even when I had those things, it still persisted that I wanted to write. I was always interested in behavior in people's minds. So, at Morehouse, I majored in psychology. I thought that was a good look. I took a black psychology class, and there were these giants who were at Howard University that I really wanted to work with. So I did a summer research stint there right before I graduated. And I was like, I really want to rock with these cats, but they're serious. So I don't know if I want to do this next year. This senior year is really heavy on me. And there was this graduate school fair that I went to with one of my homies, and this dude was like lonely over in the corner at Columbia Journalism School. And I was like, well, what do you have to do to get down with y'all? And he was like, well, why don't you apply? Do you write? And I was like, yeah, I actually do. And so I applied and got in, and I figured, okay, well, I can do a 9-month stint in New York City. That doesn't sound bad. Not at all. Kind of use the city as an opportunity to be my beat, as it were. So I went there knowing that I was going to go into psychology by the time I finished college. And after I finished that program, I went to Howard University. And while at the same time I was at Howard University, I worked at University of Maryland College Park for their Upward Bound program. Okay. So I was able to kind of, in parallel, use the stuff that I was learning about and apply it at the same time. And then I was also writing for Vibe and a magazine at the time called Code. Mm-hmm. And then also I did criticism, hip hop stuff for the Washington Post. Right. And so that's... You
used to write for Blaze too, didn't you?
Yeah. Oh, man. Oh, you're trying to bring it back for real. You done your research, man.
Of course.
No, Blaze, absolutely. I was down with Jesse Washington and the crew at Blaze, which was a spinoff, right? A spinoff of Vibe. Right. And really concentrated on the core principles of hip hop. Right. And I was a writer at first, and then I became a contributing editor with the likes of Barbito Garcia and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we really had a lot of fun there for the limited time that we were up and running.
What's your take on I don't know if you call it the evolution of, I'll just say, what is your take on where hip hop journalism and black music journalism is now?
Oh, I think I'm always hesitant to kind of pile on to us, because I really do think it's part of the larger kind of swatch of what journalism looks like and where it has evolved or devolved to. Journalism is supposed to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted, right? That kind of becomes a core tenet. At least that's how I was taught. And I think a lot of the journalism, it doesn't have to be hard hitting or heavy necessarily, but you want to make sure that you're informing people and not just, kind of being in the same room with the people that you kind of want to be cool with.
Right.
And so, with hip hop journalism, I think that it was, a lot of it was hamstrung from the start, because you had a lot of people who were in the room, they had access, and because they had that access, they said, okay, I'm getting ready to tell some stories. Now, there's a difference between telling stories and really, shedding light or advancing the culture, as it were.
Right.
And so I think, in the best case scenario, you're able to do some really, really good stories and interviews and conversations that allow people to find a deeper sense of themselves through the stories that they're telling about people that have made it, or have had struggles and then made it, or have had struggles and are still struggling, and you're able to identify with them. Those are kind of the best stories. And I think the worst stories are those where you just have folks who are writing sycophantically about people who they want to be like. They're just kind of on their nuts. So I think that does not, I think that, that's something that you can certainly see in hip hop journalism, but you can see that in journalism overall, right? So if you look at even, and I, my degree, if I'm talking degreed, a lot of people don't even have a lot of respect for degreed people who are in journalism, but my degree's in magazine journalism, and I have a minor in broadcast. And if you look at broadcast journalism right now, as much as you might like in MSNBC over Fox, there still is kind of that twist of opinion where you're inserting yourself into the story to the point where the story is becoming blurred. And it's becoming about you and your perspective.
It becomes secondary.
That's right. Instead of about what the story is, how you're advancing and reporting out.
Yeah, and that's scary. I always say, when newspapers first started backing candidates, and when news stations or news programs started being more about the ratings and actually reporting the news, it's kind of no longer journalism. Everything has an agenda. Absolutely.
And I don't take issue. I think that, there's a difference between having an op-ed page or an op-ed section, you know what I'm saying? And there's even a difference, in my estimation, around backing a candidate, what's best for the country or what's best for your city and things like that. All things being equal, you're giving kind of this kind of subjective assessment of the candidate. But then when it comes to, I don't know, there just becomes a fine line and a slippery slope, to your point.
Yeah, definitely. With teaching, well, first of all, how does it feel to be able to be a professor at your alma mater?
It's really cool.
Yeah,
it's really cool. When I've been at Morehouse for 15 years now, which is a trip, because when I came back, I was like, I'm gonna do this for 2 years and then bounce, right? And when I first came back, it was really mind blowing, because I was just shy of 10 years out. I graduated in 95. Oh no, I was 10 years out. I graduated in 95 and came back in 2005. So to look at kind of a decade that had passed, it's a whole different generation who's in there. Yeah. But you still have professors that you had, and there are fundamental tenets of the institution that persist. It's kind of dope to be in the tradition of.
Yeah, I'm sure that has to be an amazing feeling. You have written textbooks and speak a lot about the psychology of black boys and black men, which is something that I think in 2018, 2019, people are really afraid to touch. Yeah. But you've been doing it for a while. What made you take that route, and kind of do you face difficulties trying to make people really understand that black men actually do have a psychology? We're not just, out here roaming around being savages, and you know what I mean?
Sometimes, I became interested in doing it really by training. I'm a personality psychologist and an identity theorist.
Okay.
And so what that means simply is that I'm interested in who people are and how it is that they find themselves to be.
Okay.
And the way that I look at that has been by looking at black people as whole and healthy, which is typically not done. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think that I decided to do that when, like, I think for a career.
Don't glance over that though. Like, get into the whole people thing.
Yeah.
Because that's major.
No, absolutely. And so what I was getting ready to say is in doing a literature review, right? So I'm going through all these ideas about what is it I'm interested in and what's the major idea I want to put forward at it or advance for my doctorate. And as I'm doing that, I know I want to do something black, right? And I want to do something that's relevant. I don't just want to replicate a study and just make it black faced, right? I really want it to make sense. And I was looking at, all right, well, let me look at black men and black boys. And a lot of that is an extension. As you're doing theory, it's always going to kind of be an extension of yourself. So I thought about myself growing up and how I was really, really fortunate because of the family that I came from and the assets that I had because of my family and the access that I had as well. But I also was in environments and contexts that, was the black experience, and when I say that, we know that the black experience is varied. It's not monolithic or anything like that, but it's something that you, I, and other black folks would be able to touch and relate to and be like, yeah, it's not all roses up in this continent or this country that's the United States or North America. And so as I was doing research, you always hear stuff, and again, I said my mom is a clinical psychologist, so I had an idea of how it is that, and I grew up for a significant time in Texas, so I know what racism looks like. Yeah. I know what overt racism looks like. I know what systemic racism looks like. I know what cultural racism looks like. I get all that, but as I was going through the books and I was looking at how it is that science was defining black people and how it is that they were defining black men and black men as a group and then black women as a group, I was like, God, dog, we can't win for losing. It was like no matter what, the research was saying that, okay, let's say we are talking about people being healthy. Well, you're healthy, but it's in spite of where it is you came from, or it's in spite of your parents.
So we can't just be people.
Right. It's like, can I just be this guy who's healthy and who's here? And so that made me really want to look at, all right, I know that I'm, however flawed I am and whatever broken vessel I am, so are we all. How is it that I'm healthy and whole, and how is it that we can look at assets? And really what I was thinking was, we know that the norm is the white, male, heterosexual Anglo-Saxon, right? So we kind of know that as the norm. Well, what if we treated black folk as if they were normal?
Right.
What if we treated black men and black boys as if they were normal, and we didn't just paint them in this space of pathology? And what I say in a lot of my writing is, certainly black folks have touched pathology because of our legacy here on this continent. Right. So we've touched pathology, but touching pathology and being familiar with it should not allow us to be mistaken as pathological. You know what I'm saying? So being, from the hood and growing up at, when I grew up in Los Angeles, I was off 21st and La Brea, and I just bumped into a homeboy today, and we were talking about, Crips were there, right? And so there were the schoolyard Crips who were in that area, and one of the things that was so special to me was, again, I go back to this access in this bubble I was able to live in because of my mother and because of her career, her being a clinician. And she spent all her money, even though we were in this particular neighborhood. I just realized this within the last 10 years. I was going to school at a private school in Bel Air, right? Wow. So I was, doing carpools to go there, and then was coming home to where there was gang activity.
Right.
But the homies in the neighborhood were like, not him. I had a regular, we have fights and all that kind of stuff. Nobody was jumping me into any gangs or anything like that, because they were like, this person he's not about that, right? He literally is not about that life. And I think that there is this protective aspect, and there's that, that hope in this visible person who's there and in this family that I really owe a lot to, and I think that there is asset that's associated with community in that way, right? And so even though these folks were out doing God knows what, right, gang banging, there's also a humanity and a wholeness and a healthy space for that as well. And I think that as much as society writ large is interested in the pathology and is interested in the salacious details of someone's downfall, I'm not interested in that. I'm really interested in how is it that we're healthy? How is it that we're whole? How is it that we're productive? How is it that, this is a conversation I have with my kids. I began having it with my kids and then started, kind of teaching from it. As you start to think about superheroes, I loved Spider-Man growing up. I want to say that I always loved Black Panther. I mean, I love Black Panther when, he was in the cartoons for a little bit, and now, we got the major motion pictures. It's dope.
But Spider-Man was your guy.
Spider-Man was my guy. And the reason was because my mother and my father always said to me, look, you want to make sure that you're looking at people that you want to emulate or be like that can look like you. Right. And so Spider-Man had a mask on. And so for me, I was like, yo, who knows what's under that mask? That's a brother under the mask. Right. So you can imagine, fast forward to the end of 2018, beginning 2019, you got, this Spider-Man who's Miles Morales, right? This Puerto Rican black kid, and I'm like, what? That's what's up. This is amazing. So you got Black Panther, you got Spider-Man, you have the Avengers, you have all of this stuff that you can refer to in terms of being superheroes, and I expose my children to that, right? I want for them to see themselves, so they have little Spider-Mans, and I have an 11 and a 3-year-old. They have Black Panthers and all this kind of stuff. They have Batmans with the mask on. But one of the things that I tell them, at least the older of the two, is I say, as we're talking about and looking at superheroes, what more of a superhero is there than a people who have persisted and who have survived enslavement? Yeah. And so when we're really talking about kind of these superhuman attributes and these superhuman abilities, for us to be here and to be smiling, laughing, singing, contributing to society, redefining society, I mean, that's some superhero type stuff. And so I think that being able to twist kind of conventional wisdom about how people of color are, or how black folk are, how black men are, how black boys are, and put it through that lens is important.
Definitely. Now, you wrote a book on, I guess, the language of hip hop, the narrative of hip hop. How does that tie in with the lyrics and the presentation and the sometimes posturing that we do in hip hop? When I say we, because we both grew up in the hip hop generation. Yeah. We part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think what you're referring to is an article. So
there's an article.
There's the published article where I talk about.
But you were gonna do a whole book on that, right?
I really was. Yeah. You really good, man. You're really good. So I really no, I was. I actually started it as a book project. Yeah. And I started as a book project. I'll give you a little bit of background because I wanted to meet Rakim.
Dope.
That's just what it was. I was like, this guy, I gotta meet him, right? And so I was like, I want to meet him. I figured out how to get in the same room with him, and I was going to write about him from a scholarship perspective. And so I had an opportunity to sit down and talk to him for, a good chunk of time. And then after I talked with him, it was weird, like 2-3 weeks later, I was in the room talking to Cube. Wow. And I was talking to them about this theory that I had, right? That was talking about how black folk, black men in particular, were doing psychology of the everyday. And you could find that in the lyrics that they were using. And so I was talking to Rakim about it. I talked to Cube about it. I was able to sit down and talk to Kid Cudi about it, Murs, and a couple other people. And in doing that, I advanced my theory where I was talking about this thing called identity orchestration, where you coordinate and balance your identity given whatever context that you have. And how it is that you do that can oftentimes be read in the language that you use, or the conversations that you have, or the language that you don't use, or the conversations that you don't have. And so one of the things that I had said was that hip hop in the 21st century really represented an iteration of Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. Meaning, you know, there's this famous book, obviously, but there's a passage in the book where he says, I'm an invisible man, not a supernatural ectoplasm as you might imagine me to be, but someone that you don't see because you only see the things that you need for me to be. And of course, you know, James Baldwin and Toni Morrison have reframed that a lot as well. Well, for hip hop, I think that the way that it's become commodified and hyper commercialized, there are aspects of it that are presented as what people need for it to be so that they can feel comfortable about where they sit. But it's not necessarily the whole story of who a people are or what hip hop is, right? And so
you pick and choose what
exactly,
you want to see.
Absolutely. So when I talk about the language of hip hop, what I talk about is, and I think, you know, a lot of folks talk about well the language of hip hop. I think DJ Premier said it very clearly. I think when they were revisiting Jay-Z's Reasonable Doubt, and there was like a mini doc on that, and Premier is on there and says, you know, either you get it or you don't. You know what I mean? If I'm spitting some stuff or somebody is spitting some stuff and I'm spinning some stuff that you don't quite understand, he's like, you know, my mom does not understand hip hop.
Right.
Well, that's it's a coded language.
Yep.
Cube has said the same type of thing in the sit down that we had. He said, you know, there's some things, if you don't get it, then you're not supposed to get it, right? Then you're a square, right? I feel like I'm from the Bay, right?
Right.
So there's that, and then of course, most recently, Pusha T and his Grammy-nominated album, and you know, the first cut off of there is, if you know, you know. And so what he's saying is, I'm talking about some real stuff, and if you're a part of the culture and a part of the language, then you know what I'm saying. If you're not a part of it, then step aside. Then I'm not talking to you. And I think it becomes important for us to have, in many aspects, folks who are able to decode the language so that we have this type of visibility that we have earned. Now, I say sometimes because I think that it's still important for us to have a coded language so that we're able to communicate and be validated and reinforced in a way that only we can do it, and not have kind of that third person in there patting you on the back saying, yeah, homie. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I think it becomes really tricky, but important.
I'm glad you said that. So hip hop, you know, I feel like it's been the number one genre for a while, but it's finally been accepted as the number one musical genre. But I feel like in a lot of ways our culture is still viewed and used as a subgenre.
Yeah.
And do you feel like the reasoning you just gave, do you feel like that's part of it?
Yeah, I do. I think that, you know, one thing that mainstream culture will do is they'll take what's most convenient, what's most accessible, and they'll put it out there to the masses. Yeah. And the things that require a little deeper thought, they just kind of leave to the side. And so I think that hip hop culture is a culture that's so complex and so nuanced and so rich that to kind of lift it all up and put it within the mainstream space, it would be a lot of work for everybody to have to do. But if we want to just look at, okay, well, what's commercial? Well, they're talking about, you know, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, talking about bling and stuff like that. Well, that jives with kind of this capitalistic understanding of what society is. And it's like, okay, well, this is what these cats are talking about. But it becomes interesting because black folks just reinvent and put extra flavor on stuff. It's not anything that's necessarily brand new. So just because we're talking about material things does not make us materialistic. We live within a society that is by and large materialistic. So this is our spin on the game, you know?
Yeah, that's deep. What is black cultural currency worth in this country in 2019?
$1, right?
Hey man, you who else am I gonna ask this to?
What is black cultural currency worth? What was the last part?
In this country Like right now in 2019, what is it worth?
Well, to you and me, it's worth a whole lot.
Right.
Right. And I think that I guess the reason I'm giving kind of pause to it is to the question is because, I'm thinking on black cultural currency in terms of an authentic black cultural currency versus kind of a prefabricated black cultural currency. So are we talking about kind of what it means to be able to walk down the street, see another brother and give them a nod,
right,
and have that kind of cultural connect? Or are we talking about driving down the street and seeing somebody in a Ferrari, a badass car, and you're like, he made it, that's what's up.
Right.
Well, that becomes kind of this faux cultural currency that I don't, kind of going back to what I said before, that I don't see as being necessarily authentically black, quote unquote. Not saying that it's not a part of the black aesthetic, but it's not. That's just part of the capitalistic or the Western society currency that we respect.
Right.
But the black cultural currency of being connected because of the type of tumult that we have gone through as a people, that's worth a whole lot because it speaks to a people, it speaks to a persistence, it speaks to an improvisation, it speaks to a determination, and it speaks to, I think, a special kind of freedom that that we have access to. We only need to realize where and how it is.
Yeah. That makes sense. 100%. Lighten it up a little bit. Going back to
like, I'm glad that makes sense to you. Not exactly sure what I said. No, I'm just kidding.
Going back to, I think I already know the answer to this, but I'm gonna throw a little twist on it. Since you studied lyrics, you studied narrative, you are of the hip hop generation, covered it, documented it. Who's your favorite lyricist of all time?
My gosh.
And who's your favorite rapper of all time? Because they're not always one and the same.
No, you're right. They're not. Man, this stuff is going to be documented for posterity. I can't even,
I'm sure your students have asked you this.
They have, and I change a lot. So,
and that's cool. Who is it right now at this moment?
Right now, I think with the lights in my face, my favorite lyricist is Rakim.
I figured that's
He just has to be. I'm a relic of the time period that I come from. You know what I'm saying? So Rakim is my favorite lyricist. When I think about my favorite rapper, and I've never said this publicly, it very well could be Jay-Z, right? It very well could be Jay-Z. And the reason that I say that is because I'm so interested in life stories. The way that I get at identity is looking at the arc of people's lives and the stories that they tell. I think that he's such a prolific storyteller. But also, I really like looking at the arc of where he started, where you're looking at where he is with jazz, right? And then you eventually get to Reasonable Doubt. You look at that, and you look at the evolution over the different albums, and it's just interesting as somebody who's around his same age, right? Being able to look at the 444 album, I thought was so good from an identity theorist's perspective, and then he's able to, so he's coming into himself, trying to, really talking about kind of the scarred tissue that he has and processing that, being really, really raw and honest about things. Absolutely. And then doing a joint with your wife, where you're able to kind of be honest and look at those flaws that you just talked about an album before. I think that that the way that he has, what did he say? I didn't cross over. I brought the hood to them. Right. I think that in many ways he has done that, and I respect and like that a lot. Now, having said that, I gotta go and I have to qualify some things, right?
No, that's all good, man.
I love Guru from Gangstar, having gone to Morehouse College and him being a graduate of Morehouse, and thinking about the kind of Pan-Africanist orientation that really is very much manifest. Pardon the pun. See what I said there? Manifest. Only real heads will know. That means a lot to me. The Clips, I've always really dug the Clips. And having family who is from kind of the Newport News area, knowing they're from Virginia Beach, it's kind of cool to look at how it is they're connected, and how it is they're connected to that. And I also love De La Soul and A Tribe Called Quest.
Of course.
And Brand Nubian, right? Tribe Called Quest are the kind of the artists from Native Tongues who got, I think, the most shine, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And I think, duly so. But I really like the slow burn of De La Soul.
Yeah.
So to be able to, again, look at their developmental arc, looking at the good music that they have consistently cranked out. I guess their most recent album came out in 2017. I don't think it was 2018. 2017 they had it come out, right? So those are folks that I really have to talk about. Obviously Nas, and I like Rick Ross a lot. I really do like Rick Ross. I think I heard you talk about you're not necessarily a huge fan,
right?
But I do like Rick Ross a lot. Again, looking at that kind of the evolution of the man, I think is important.
You mentioned Brand Nubian. This is a conversation I've had with people who really know their stuff. First Brand Nubian album or second Brand Nubian album?
Oh, it's the first one for me.
Really?
The first Brand Nubian album for me. I remember it because I don't know, Sunshine, the Roy Ayers sample, and all that kind of stuff, and I remember it being I have it as being connected to my college experience, just because while I was in high school, there was some cat who had access to Morehouse. He had brought back a newspaper, and that newspaper reviewed that first Brand Nubian album. Okay. And for some reason, that really stuck with me and hammered home.
Gotcha. I liken to me the first Brand Nubian album and the first Game album, because people had that as well. It's the one with the songs that everyone knows. Yeah. Game had Dre on that album.
Yep.
Brand Nubian had Pooba and the whole thing.
Yep.
But to me, the Game second album and the Brand Nubian second album, and God We Trust, were superior pieces of work.
I didn't think so.
From beginning to end.
I'm going to listen to it tonight while I'm writing.
Dude, that beginning, that Allahu Akbar, that
that's hard.
So let's play the three. Look, come on, man.
That is hard. It's hard.
And it forced Lord Jamar to step his game up.
That's true.
Become a good rapper.
That's true. I don't disagree.
Yeah.
You're not lying. I hear you.
It's we discussed the whole HBCU thing earlier. You mentioned going to Howard, studying at Howard, graduating from Morehouse as well. I feel like we go off and on, and it's probably like once a year, once every 2 years. What is your take on people that question? I feel like it's a loaded question, whether HBCUs are relevant or necessary in this day and age.
Yeah, I don't engage in the conversation. I think it's such a false starter, And it's kind of like when I tell, again, I'll reference my older son. If somebody says something about my older son, he's like, but I'm not that. If somebody says, your dad isn't even around. Yeah. Well, yeah, he takes me to school and picks me up every day. He's at the soccer practices. He's playing basketball.
Respond?
Yeah. Why do you need to even respond to that?
Right.
But I will, just for the sake of clarity.
Right.
I think that the import of historically black colleges and universities is fundamentally undeniable. And I think that for so many reasons, and I'll say most conveniently and accessible a reason for today, especially considering the current zeitgeist and era that we're in with this crazed man who's in the White House and the folks who are supporting him. So it's not only that this dude is a lunatic, but it's how everybody else is co-signing this lunacy. It really is not safe outside. You know what I'm saying? And what I mean by that is that your own kind of sanity is at risk when you have leadership that is normalized to the capacity that it is. And so I think that being able to have safe spaces like historically black colleges and universities is so paramount and important to have, because even if everybody is not going to those institutions, you have a large chunk of folks who are being trained in that way, who are being able to say, look, man, you're tight, all right? Don't worry about this. We know it's nuts outside. Let's go ahead and get right. Let's go ahead and learn our lesson, as my granddaddy used to say to me. And then what you do is you go out and you save the world. And I think that it becomes so important to look at how it is that these institutions that have so little financially
Right.
have so much richness and so much to offer in terms of just straight up and down soul. And so I think in many ways, the way that Martin Luther King talks about black folks as being the conscience of America, I think that what historically black colleges and universities have the opportunity to do is to cultivate that type of black genius that holds the country accountable to the consciousness that they have to answer to.
Yeah, it's very true. Very true. You mentioned your sons a couple times, and also you teach young men. What I know we've discussed a lot what you bring into their lives. What do they bring into your life?
Oh man, clarity, redefined purpose, right? I think I was going in the right direction, you know what I mean? But these two dudes really kind of hold you accountable in a very, very special way. Mm-hmm. Because you're not only answering for yourself, obviously, but you're answering for and to them both figuratively and literally. And so it puts a finer point on my work, and it puts a finer point on the man that I am and that I aspire to be kind of every day.
That's super dope. I definitely appreciate that, man. Thank you. We're going to take a quick break and discuss a couple hot topics.
Okay.
We'll be right back. We're going
right.
to take a quick break and get right to it.
Sounds good.
You watching Day One Radio, Live Hip Hop Daily. Be right back. Hello. We appreciate you listening and watching and rocking with us here on Day One Radio. As you can see, my brother Maurice Garland is not here, but we're still in the building with Professor David Wall Rice, and I'm going to try to get this right the first time. We have Oronike, Odeleye.
Very good.
All right, I did all right.
Good job.
Cool. I'm black. We supposed to be able to pronounce some names it's all good. I should be able to pronounce that better than Richard Smith all day. So, you've been making your review. Y'all have been listening to Karen Hunter and Democracy Now!, all kind of places. You have definitely been making your rounds, so I appreciate you coming in to chop it up with us. Obviously, everybody in the world is talking about the guy R. Kelly for the last few days, and I was speaking to Maurice over the weekend, and I was like, we can talk about it all day, but I would like to have a woman on to talk about this, and he suggested you.
Okay.
Because you co-founded the MuteRKelly movement. You've also done, a lot of other stuff, studied different places around the world and whatnot. Very intelligent woman. If you guys follow her on Twitter, you already know this. Tell them where they can follow you too.
Sweet Lady Oro, but it's sweet like a hotel suite. SUITE Lady ORO.
All right, cool. So get down to it, man. What prompted? Well, first let me say what I really, really appreciated, because I'm one of those people that I'm always like follow the money and pay attention to who's telling you what.
Yep.
What I really appreciated about you guys starting the MuteRKelly thing is it wasn't from an emotional standpoint. Mm-hmm. It was from a let's get something done standpoint.
Right.
I feel like black people are way too emotional about things that piss us off, and we just give it lip service and nothing happens. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us like what prompted you briefly, because I know you told the story a million times, but for those who don't know, what prompted you guys to start the MuteRKelly movement, and what kind of traction it's had since you started it?
Well, I know everybody heard, especially in Atlanta last year when they were doing the whole like sex cult story in Johns Creek, and the parents, the Savage family was out there trying to get their daughter back, who I think they haven't seen now in 4-5 years, somewhere in there.
Crazy.
So I saw that on the news. I was at work, actually. I saw it on the news. And I was like, whoa, like R. Kelly's up doing something? Like I really had not heard anything about him really since like the P tape and Aaliyah. You know what I mean? I've been living my own life. I was around Aaliyah's age, 15-ish or so. And then I'm in college. I'm doing my own thing. I'm not paying attention. So that kind of prompted me to kind of do a Google search, you know, just kind of look up what's going on. And I mean, I just fell down a rabbit hole. And you see that since Aaliyah, every other year, women have been coming out, families have been coming out, pressing charges, trying to get media attention around what he was doing. You look through his timeline and you see he's paying people off. And I don't mean paying people off as in, y'all knew what was going on, here's some money, but as in, please don't take this to court, here, take this money instead. You know, and he'd been drawing cases out for 6 years. He'd been, I mean, just doing all type of mess, getting off on technicalities, just, you know, all manner of mess. And so I was just sitting in my office really by myself on lunch, and I was infuriated. You know, I was like, these victims are doing what we ask victims to do. They're coming forward and saying, hey, this is what's happening. They're coming forward when it happens. When the minute most of these families find out, they're in court. You know what I mean? Like, so they're doing what we ask them to do. And we as a community are not only ignoring them, but have turned it into a joke. You know what I mean? Like, this kind of R. Kelly peeing on people is a common joke in the black community. And that's some 14-year-old girl's trauma. You know what I mean? Like, that's some 14-year-old girl's humiliation. And we're laughing about it. So I was just pissed. And I didn't know what to do. So I said, I'm going to start a petition to ask Atlanta radio to stop playing him. Like, I can't press charges. I'm not, you know, I don't have no evidence or whatever. I'm just one chick. But can we all agree that we should remove him from our consciousness, you know what I mean, as a people? Like, this is not what we need to be supporting. So that's kind of where it started. Then we found out he had a concert coming up in Atlanta like a month or so later. We were like at a Fulton County venue that my tax dollars go to. It was kind of, oh no, we can't do that. So let's try to get the concert canceled. Then it was like, okay, well, he's got concerts all over. Let's try to get them all canceled. Then it was really about like, let's just cut off the monster at the legs. Because what is keeping him from going to jail is his ability to insulate himself from the consequences of his crime through money. So let's go after the money. Let's cut off the money train.
It's super funny that you say that, because people think I be joking, but like, I stopped streaming anything years ago. Like, I don't know how many years ago, and my thing was, you do what you want to do. I'm just not contributing to the legal defense fund.
Exactly.
And like, it was a joke, but I was serious. You know, at the same time, like, I thought it was weird when the tape came out and people were like, did you see the tape? No, nigga, I don't watch child porn. Like, why the fuck would I be watching the tape? You know what I mean? Like, what do you mean? Have I seen the tape? Like, I've never seen it. Right. And I technically, like, it's just my thing. Like, I don't watch police shootings. I didn't watch the Lifetime joint. Like, I don't need that in, like, I read. I deal with enough, you know what I mean? My question is, and I didn't know this, I knew that there were settlements that happened, like civil settlements. Are there people outside of the young lady from that tape that have filed criminal charges against him?
The criminal charges against him have been the sex tape and the 21 instances of child pornography that the police removed from his home. So, you know, lots of people go, oh, he was acquitted, which really to me is black people talking out both sides of our neck. We're like, George Zimmerman was acquitted, but we know he guilty, and then police are guilty, and the justice system don't work for us. But R. Kelly was acquitted, and the justice system was working perfectly well. We should all treat him like an innocent man. Like as though the fact that he was acquitted does not mean that they did not have 21 separate videos of him having sex with children. The question was never whether that's him on the tape or it's children on the tape. The issue was the police had a warrant for one part of the house, and they found the tapes in another part of the house. So they were thrown out as inadmissible. That's how he got off on that. So those have been the criminal charges. The rest have been mostly civil charges.
Wow, that's wild. I feel like, and I love this conversation because I had never met you, and you're like a regular person. Like, I didn't know you was gonna come in here with Nog Champion and shit. Like, I didn't know. So I love this. My question is this, and I've been having this debate with people since the Surviving R. Kelly thing came out. and you guys can, I want both of y'all to answer this, and you can wholeheartedly disagree with me if you do. Why, in a lot of instances, does it take white money and mainstream media attention for black people to be done with other black people who do dirty shit?
So you're looking at me on that?
No, both of y'all answer like this is a real conversation.
All right.
I'll start. I'll give you a breather because I know you've been on it. I think you look at kind of the elegance of white supremacy. Mm-hmm. I think that fundamentally that's what has us hating ourselves in many respects. What has us hating our partners, our allies in terms of talking about black women. When you think about the othering of. We understand that, again, the norm is whiteness and the abnormal or the aberrant is that of color. And so what we are consistently cycling to do, unfortunately, either known to us or, pre-consciously, unconsciously, is we're looking for that validation to be other than othered. And so I think that we find that realization in money and in, attention and fame and trinkets. That's exactly what I was getting ready to say, right? But when you have within mainstream spaces, right? So the documentary Surviving R. Kelly being on Lifetime is a lot, right? Because you look at kind of the drama that Lifetime has for women especially, and then you're putting in this kind of real life drama that's 6 episodes, right, over 3 nights, and you're and I got through 4, right? I couldn't do the last 2, but I got through 4, and it seems like, and I know I'm going off a little bit, but I hope I'm going to come back and it makes sense. It seems like a lot. Like it can seem like overkill. Like, come on, what do we need that much? Could be a question, and the response is obviously. Right? Obviously, that much is necessary because this dude still has a record deal. Because we're still, playing lip service to the accountability that needs to be had by him and those people who are holding him down. And so I think that it's nothing less than courageous for the people who were able to produce it, executive produce it, and participate and tell the stories that are really bringing this real disgusting evil to light. And so coming back to why does it take kind of white money or this mainstream space, because oftentimes that's where we're looking for the shine and for the validation. So if we're able to put something on Main Street that says, look, the stuff that you guys have been rocking to since forever that you say is a part of church celebrations and graduation ceremonies and marriages and stuff like that, that's fool's gold, right? Just straight up and down. And it becomes difficult for us to grasp with the reality of that because we don't want something to be wrong with ourselves, right? But there is. So exercise that shit, put it out, and make sure you keep it moving in this healthy space.
Right. No, makes sense.
I would co-sign all of that, but also say it's kind of a double-edged sword because when we started it was kind of black media that would kind of pick up what we were doing. It would be the Rude or Griot or whatever. It would come up, and black people would go, "Oh, this is black people tearing each other down." Then it was in white media, and it's, "Oh, y'all white folks is trying to tear black people down." You know what I mean? So it spread it way further. I think most of us are getting our news from white outlets, and truth be told, even when we think we're getting it from black outlets, we're still getting it from white outlets, right? You know what I mean? But I mean, it was that kind of a thing where there are actually this must be legitimate because it's on CNN. It's not Very Smart Brothers. Now it's on, you know what I mean, New York Times. Right. So I mean, sometimes it just takes that to get the message out.
Thank you. Do you feel like this attention there's actually going to be the long-term effect?
I think so. We've already seen just today, it was reported that the Fulton County DA is opening a criminal investigation.
Right. I saw that.
The Chicago DA has called for witnesses and victims to come forward so they can open an investigation. I'm music industry adjacent in my day job,
Gotcha.
and so have a lot of connections who have already told me that a lot of kind of features he had lined up, or things that he was doing, a lot of those producers don't want to work with him. The
You
singers
can't
don't
stand
want
next
to
to
work
him
with
right
him.
now.
Right, he's a hot potato,
yeah,
which
yeah.
again is our aim, to make him unwork-withable. So he has one concert coming up in Germany, which we're working on getting canceled, but they have stopped advertising concerts altogether until maybe a month beforehand, because they're afraid of us, coming through and getting it canceled, because we have 11 canceled so far. So I think absolutely, and even if he gets off on all of this again, I think that it's tainted now. You can't see him, listen to him without thinking about what you saw in Lifetime. You can't just play him at your family reunion and everybody just have these good vibes that they used to have. You can't just play him at your wedding, because people are still gonna it has changed the mood of his music. So I think that will, you'll kind of shun him. It's like I grew up on the Cosby Show. I can't watch it now. You know what I mean? It just feels icky to me. So I think it's that same kind of a thing will happen with R.
What do
Kelly.
you guys say to the people who still find some kind of an excuse or reasoning to support in their own? I've actually read people say, I love his music, I don't care what people say, should he be in jail? Yeah, but he's talented and had damn good lawyers to get him. I can't really wrap my mind around that, and I'm definitely not on no holier than thou, whatever. But I'm bruh, come on,
Right. I try. I'm still. Me and Jesus are working on it, but I'm trying. I try to be non-judgmental about people's emotional attachment to their favorite entertainers, right? Because we all have the people that is just, that's it for us. And I understand when people are listening to 12 Play or I Believe I Can Fly or whatever, they're not thinking about R. Kelly and sex cults. They're not thinking about the video. They're thinking about their family reunion. They're thinking about their wedding. They're thinking about their graduation. It's the soundtrack of their life. They're thinking about themselves and that moment wherever they were in their life when that was their ish. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I can understand that emotional attachment to it. Absolutely. What I think a lot of those people don't understand is how the money train works. They think listening to it is an innocent act that does not affect anything one way or the other. And so they don't really understand how streaming works in terms of your revenue.
Right.
They don't understand how radio play works in terms of your revenue. They don't understand how playing him in the club normalizes him in our society. They don't understand how promoters are looking and seeing, okay, how many people in the city follow him on Instagram and Twitter? How many plays is he getting in that city? I'm going to book him for a show here because people are listening to him. What I mean? They don't understand that they create an ecosystem for him that makes them complacent in that. Those are your dollars. When people are talking about, they took the money. No, the settlements are your money. You know what I mean? That's your paycheck that you gave that man to pay, for his crime. So, I don't think they can kind of understand that connection.
It's fun, and that, but there are still.
Let me say something, because I dig that and I hear that, and I'm not here to tell anybody what to do with their, headphones on or what have you, but I think that cognitive dissonance is a hell of a drug, right? So to separate and compartmentalize the two is being profoundly irresponsible to community, but it's also being irresponsible to self. And I think that when you are playing that music, you are participating in violence. And I think that's important to understand. So the degree to which you want to participate in that violence is all you, is what I would say. Because the question was, what would you say to that? I'd say, okay, well, if you want to participate in that kind of violence, that's on you. But if that's you, I don't know that I can rock with you like that. Right? It doesn't mean that I'm cutting you off necessarily, but it does mean that whatever I thought we could have in terms of a close bond, in terms of upliftment, in terms of community build and things like that, I can't. We're not on the same page.
Absolutely.
No, I agree with that. But it's funny, you're saying that people don't understand, but I think a lot of times people do understand. I was looking at, and I don't know if it's still the case, I was looking at the iTunes charts the other day, and Ignition Remix was number 9 on the iTunes. Like, that's what people who still buy music.
Right.
Like, that's not streaming. That's,
Right.
I went in here, looked for this song, let me buy this song. Like, that's kind of crazy.
But, you know, I mean, like,
even though Ignition Remix is white America's favorite song.
Right. But you know, when he's talking about cognitive dissonance, I mean, that is so real. 60% of black women have been sexually assaulted before they're 18. When you go to an R. Kelly concert, it is probably 85% female. That means more than half of the women in there have had an R. Kelly violate them in their life. Yeah. And they still bought tickets. I mean, that kind of disconnecting your mind about how you are participating in this cycle is mind-boggling to me. I mean, it really, really is mind-boggling to me. I don't understand it. But, you know, we all come to our own understanding in our own time, I guess.
And let me correct myself right now, as we speak right now. Ignition Remix is number 6, and I believe I Can Fly is number 9 on the iTunes R&B charts.
Well, he needs all that money right now.
I don't know he doesn't even own his publishing. Right. So it's like, it's not, that's a whole nother conversation. Right. But it's very interesting you said that, because I feel like a lot of the reasons that, and the word normalize has come up, a lot of the reasons that people are able to rationalize this behavior is, like you said, their uncle is an R. Kelly. Mm-hmm. There was an R. Kelly picking them up from school. There was like that kind, like no one in our communities is like, oh, it's okay for, you know, men to have sex with underage women or women to have sex with underage men. But many of us have seen that shit happening for decades and said nothing. Yeah. And that's an issue as well. Right. Like, if you just let it ride, like any of us, and me and you are around the same age. I'm not sure how old you are. I grew up in Oakland in the crack era. I saw dope boys picking up the girl that was a freshman. Right. You know what I mean? And it was okay. Right. You know what I mean? It wasn't okay, but but I honestly feel like that's the reason. It's psychological shit that people have not dealt with in their own life that make them think that this is okay, or I can just ignore it, or it's just one person, or it's just whatever, and we got to get past that. Like, I think I have all kind of, you know, thoughts and issues around, you know, white folks making money off this and the women that are suffering not getting nothing. Mm-hmm. But I hope that this extends the conversation beyond celebrities to our own families, to our own communities, so we can stop this normalized behavior, because it's got to stop somewhere.
Right.
And I think it does. You know, I count Dream, who's the executive producer, as a friend of mine, and I was telling her the other night that I have an 11-year-old son, right? And his first day of school was the beginning of this week, and you know, I was cutting his hair, and I was like, do you know who R. Kelly is? And so he's like, yeah. And I was like, do you know what's going on? And he already knows, you know what I'm saying? And he's sat down and has met Dream before and all that kind of stuff. And I said, well, you know, Dream executive produced this thing. It's all out there. And I wanted to talk to him because I don't want him tripping up on it at school. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and I think that the type of dialogue, age appropriate, right? The type of dialogue that I was able to have for him was advanced by, you know, what's going on in terms of that piece of media being out there. Right. And I know that one of the things that Dream has said, as well as others who are behind this project, is, you know, it's not about R. Kelly. It's not even about victims, right? It's about how is it that we are going to get from underneath the thumb of this pathology, right? And how is it that we are going to be healthy and ensure that we have a community that doesn't tolerate this stuff. Right.
I haven't seen it. Like I said, I probably will never see it. I'm just going off of what I've read and discussing it with intelligent people. I don't know if the average person is smart enough to get that from it, which is why it takes conversations like this, and it takes conversations with each other to
I would
because there are people that I talk to that are in their 30s who your son has become aware of this. I know people in their 30s who they say they did not know about this. Yeah. And so now, a lot of people don't read. A lot of people don't have critical thinking skills, and they look at entertainment as just that.
Yeah.
So for those type of people, which that we can see from who's in office locally and nationally, that's a good piece. That's millions of people in this country. Yeah. So to be able to take it from R. Kelly did this to pathology in our communities is a huge leap for a lot of people.
I hear that.
Well, because I man all of the MuteRKelly social media stuff. Like I'm in constant conversation and have been in constant conversation with a lot of people for the past 2 years doing this work. And people make that jump kind of quickly, right? People usually they make it in the sense of, why are y'all going after R. Kelly when our community is so full of people that we need to be dealing with, right? So I mean, everybody's kind of clear that this is an issue, right? I get a lot of that, like people need to be dealing with this in their own house and in the church and in blah 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 blah. Why y'all going after R. Kelly? I get a lot of that. So I think that kind of connection they make really, really quickly, and I think part of why it had to be 6 hours of graphic, hard to watch, difficult detail is for that reason, right? A lot of people are not about nuance. You know what I mean? In the paper, we've heard R. Kelly has a thing for young girls, right? That sounds kind of it, right? That sounds innocent, right? Not he's locking them in rooms, right? He's locking them in rooms in the dark with buckets to use the restroom, and they might not come out for days on end. Not that. You know what I mean? We had to get graphic because of that very point. You know, this kind of like nuanced thing, this read between the lines. No, here's what it is. And I mean, it's a hard 6, even though I've been deep in this now for 2 years and knew most of these details. I watched it and then had to lay in bed the whole next day. I mean, it is a very heavy, it's heavy. It's a very heavy thing to watch.
Definitely. Finally,
can I ask a question? So how do you maintain? Because I know, I mean, I really know it's heavy, and I know that, self-care can be a little bit of a tricky word because it connotes that, well, I'm stepping out and being selfish or whatever. But how is it that you ensure that you're healthy and whole, in the process of doing something that's so fundamentally debilitating,
Man, in the beginning was very, very difficult. Also because it's not just you're inundated, and especially in the beginning when we started, we've watched the tide turn. Now most of the messaging I get is very positive. It was not that way when we first started at all. I mean, so much so that now I've got a security system on my house and 2 guns up in there. Like, I mean, it was very like, people were very negative. Or they were sending me very heavy, very personal stories about their own sexual abuse. People that I know and strangers. So it was very, very heavy. And I realized, I think both me and my partner, Kenyette Tisha Barnes, who's the co-founder, both realized that sometimes we just have to check out. You know what I mean? And so we became very good at going, hey, don't nobody call me about none of this stuff for the next 2 weeks. You handle it. Any PR, any whatever. Unless something happens, I'm out. And we could do that more easily in the beginning because it was like the media would pay attention for a second and then nothing would happen while we just are, working along or whatever. So it requires breaks. It absolutely requires breaks. These past week, our Instagram has gone from like 2,000 to over 10,000 followers, and that means messages just like crazy, and I can get into a thing where like I'm trying to read and see what people are talking about, right? And then I am pissed for the rest of the day. You know what I mean? Like, so it is kind of like you gotta, back up from it a little bit. Like, I can't jump into all these arguments. I can't, even though I will go on there sometimes if it's been a hard day and be like, you're a motherfucking idiot. But you really kind of have to be like, let me back up and not get in this. You know what I mean? Because it's very dark, heavy work to be thinking about day in and day out. So breaks.
Well, thank you for the work. I do want to say that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for coming through. I appreciate both of you guys. It's heavy stuff, man. We gave y'all a couple little light episodes back to back. So, you know how me and Maurice do around here. But we appreciate y'all supporting, appreciate y'all watching, appreciate you listening. Please tell people where they can follow both of you guys, and please tell people what they can do to help.
We're on all social media platforms as official MuteRKelly, and then the website is www.muterkelly.org. You can go onto the website. We have a timeline of abuse if you're not clear about all the stuff that has happened. We've got some frequently asked questions, all the stuff that people say all the time. What about the parents? What the girls with this? What that, blah, blah, that we break down, what our position is on those things. We have a lot of media you can read. We have a how you can help that kind of outlines some things that you can do. And you can sign up on our newsletter, and we send out blasts whenever we have some kind of a protest or a call to action that you can participate in.
For sure, most definitely. And where can people find you at? What's your social media and all that?
D Wallrice on Twitter. That's all I do.
All right.
I don't do it well, but that's what I do.
That's all good. And you can follow us on Hip Hop Trivia ATL for our event and Day One Radio. It's DAY, the number 1 for radio. Make sure, man, you talk to your kids, man. Talk to your kids, talk to the young ladies and the young men in your family. There's a lot of things that go on that people feel like they cannot discuss because they feel like you'll yell at them or you won't believe them. Mm-hmm. Talk to your kids, man, and stop inviting the dirty man or woman in your family to the reunion. And that shit's not cool, man. Sometimes people got to get excommunicated. Sometimes you got to get them up out of here, man. And that's all I got to say. Happy 2009. Hopefully y'all January is going good. 2019. Sheesh. That's what kind of show it's been. Thank you, H. Appreciate it. 2019. And we'll see you next week with another dope show.